All right, here. This is Turn Off the TV. They're running a marathon of kids in the hall. Ghost light dancing across the posters on the wall. Two little pixies and the slider T-Rex. I can tell that we get along well, and I wonder what's next. Turn off the TV, let's go back to my room. I've got a window with a hell of a view. And there's a full moon sitting on the church next door, sleeping bag on a hardwood floor. Turn off the TV, let's go back to my room. Woo! Never thought that a girl like you would pay me no mind. Here we are in a hot box having a hell of a time. Jim Beam and brickweed and a futon couch, and a playful smile pulling on the corner of your mouth. Turn off the TV, let's go back to my room. I've got a window with a hell of a view. And there's a full moon sitting on the church next door, sleeping bag on a hardwood floor. Turn off the TV, let's go back to my room. Woo!
Recorded live for World Cafe in front of a live virtual audience. That's a new one from Old 97's called Turn Off the TV from their new album 12th. I feel like I'm going to have a hard time saying that throughout this whole interview. 12th. Rhett Miller of Old 97's is my guest today on the show. First of all, as a Canadian, I need to thank you for that shout out right out of the gate, right at the top of that song, to the Canadian sketch group Kids in the Hall. People might remember Kids in the Hall from the 80s and the 90s. Was it something that you watched a lot?
Oh my gosh, I have such strong memories. It was the first time I felt like there were people like me out in the world doing weird art. And at the time, I was so much of this record, in fact, sort of harkens back to an era where I was more poor, living in more squalor than at any other point in my life. It was my 20s. I was, sometimes working at a restaurant, but just doing gigs 6 nights a week. But I remember watching Kids in the Hall because they would show them on HBO first, and someone had left a cable hookup in the duplex where I lived, and they hadn't turned it off. And so it was back in the day, you could get free cable if the person before you had it, and then the cable company forgot to shut it down. So the spigot was open, and I was watching Kids in the Hall, and they would run marathons, and it was pre-on-demand, but gosh, I love Kids in the Hall. I've gotten over the years to be friends with some of those guys. Dave Foley's wife Chrissy sang on a record of mine, and I know Dave. And it's funny, the day I wrote this, I was in San Francisco at the SF Sketch Fest, and I knew I was going to be interviewed in front of an audience for Amy Mann and Ted Leo's podcast, and the other guest on the show was Scott from Kids in the Hall, Scott Thompson. And so I had begun a song a few months earlier that in my mind was going to be called Kids in the Hall Marathon. And so thinking about Scott made me remember it, and I went in and I rewrote it, and the Kids in the Hall became less prominent, but still featured in the first line of the song. Just now it's not the chorus. And so I went and I performed it that day in front of that San Francisco audience, and I was really nervous that Scott would like it. But he liked it and he didn't. He's a cranky guy, you know?
I have to ask, do you have a favorite sketch that you can think of?
Oh my
It's kind
gosh.
of putting you on the spot, so it's okay if we can come back to it later.
Dave Foley, when he would play a woman, was always just, to me, it was, I don't know, there was something so beautiful about it. And there was one character that he did that was a Montreal woman of the night.
Oh, yes.
Do you remember this? And
I
he would,
think I do remember this.
she has a French accent, and she would smoke these cigarettes, and he's so beautiful as a woman. It was really beautiful. My favorite comedy, not that this is what you asked, is the kind where you simultaneously feel entertained and like you're laughing, but you're also kind of weirdly moved and almost
Yes.
sad. That's my
Yes.
favorite.
Yeah, it's definitely the most affecting kind.
Yeah.
Well, now that we have the Kids in the Hall business out of the way, the important stuff that I really needed to cover first, congratulations on the new album.
Thank you so much. It's only 1 month away from being properly out in the world.
And it's called 12th. You recorded it in Nashville right at the beginning of March. In fact, you started it literally the day that devastating tornadoes hit Nashville. Could you take us there? What was it like being there, watching that happen?
Um, we've never made a record in Nashville before. We've done overdubs. We did a single where Waylon Jennings brought us in 1997 to be his band. But Nashville is a weird town for us. We've never sold a lot of tickets there. We've never felt particularly comfortable. When I go there as a solo artist, I fly into the airport and I walk through the airport and there's three other just dudes with guitars singing their songs just like me. And I'm like, no wonder nobody, cares about me in this town. There's too many of us. It's a supply demand thing. I have a song on an earlier record called Nashville that sort of goes, into that sort of feeling like, how do I get into this club? So Nashville has always been a little bit fraught as far as an industry town. But there we were, the first day of recording in Sputnik Studios with the great Vance Powell, who did our last record before this. But he's won Grammys for his Chris Stapleton records, and he's worked with Jack White and the Raconteurs and all that. He's an incredible guy. And so there we were, suddenly feeling comfortable in this city where we had never felt comfortable before. And I realized how many of my friends had moved there, how many friends I ended up having there. And so there was this really triumphant first day. And we go back to the Airbnb we had rented, which was kind of a fancy modern building with a wall of windows. In fact, my bedroom had floor to ceiling giant windows. And when we got back to the Airbnb, we looked out and we started seeing explosions. And it was transformers exploding throughout the city. And we were fine. Like, I don't mean to try and oversell our experience, but it wasn't really until the next day, and I started talking to friends in East Nashville and realizing what they had gone through and what the city had gone through, and lives lost. It was terrifying for us in a way, but it was really moving and sweet to see the way that city pulled together, even on the east side, where it's like musicians and people, not living in big fancy houses, and not you know people that hadn't written 7 hits for Reba McEntire or whatever, just you know kids and folks like me that were like working musicians, and they had pulled together so much, and there was such a positive feeling and such an air of friendship and support that it was really inspiring. And I felt like for us, as we were making the record, it was something that we drew on to just see this resilience of this community.
Yeah, I mean, was there ever a concern that you wouldn't be able to finish making it after that sort of catastrophe hit?
Yeah, I mean, our studio was in Berry Hill, which is a neighborhood that was spared for the most part. And we were all awake all night, basically. The next day was a little bit bleary eyed. But, once we'd woken up and spoken to Vance and figured out that, his neighborhood was okay, the studio was okay, we were just excited to get back in and to try and work. For me, that's how I've always made sense out of things. Um, it's my therapy to write songs and make music, and that's the answer for problems. So to be able to go in the next day with my brothers in the old 97's and make an album was sort of the best medicine.
And so you get the album done, and then you fly back home to New York on March 12th. People might remember that was the day after Tom Hanks announced he had coronavirus and the NBA shut down, and things were starting to feel very, very real, if you recall. What was it like? Could you describe that day coming back home from recording?
Well, to go even to the night before, I performed at a benefit, Nashville Strong benefit at the City Winery, where a bunch of songwriters came together and tried to raise money for folks that had been displaced. And it was so cool. So many of my friends, and I mean, Robin Hitchcock, who's a friend now but had been an idol growing up, and Langhorne Slim was there, and the Deer Tick guys. But at one point, I remember I went to hug Langhorne Slim, and it was the very beginning of all this, and we were like, "Wait, are we allowed to hug?" And he he looked at me, and goes, in about an hour, we're all going to be singing in the same microphone. I think we're fine. But so the next day I flew home and I had a feeling it was coming because I had a friend in Italy, Rip Rowan, whose wife Vanessa Peters is a songwriter who's really big in Italy, and they were locked in an apartment. And he was writing me, and he's really this intelligent, well-spoken guy. He's like, "You, all my friends, they keep saying, 'Oh, I'll be at such and such place this summer.' You won't be anywhere this summer. You don't know. You're 1 week behind us. It is coming for you." So I had a feeling it was coming, which is part of why I started researching online options, and I wound up with Stage It, which is where I'm now doing 4 shows a week. And I did my first show there on March 16th. So I've been trying to make a go of this since early days, and it's probably worked to my benefit.
And you perform a lot out of the room you're sitting in right now.
Yeah.
And we can see the people who are kind of watching this live can see what it looks like. But maybe you could describe for radio listeners, where exactly are you at the moment?
Well, it's funny. I have two teenage kids, a 14-year-old daughter and a 16-year-old son. And when I built this room out of the corner of my overly large garage, because contrary to popular belief, I'm not like some super manly He-Man woodworker type of guy. I didn't need all of this space. I'm not rebuilding engines in here. So I built this, 10 foot by 14-foot room, and I painted the walls red, which my kids teased me mercilessly about. They're, "Why are you painting your room red? It's so stupid." And then I hung up guitars all around the walls, and my kids were like, "Oh, Dad, look at you trying to flex on everybody." And I went around trying to make this room a place that felt really inspiring and musical and creative. And then when suddenly my entire job, the way I'm feeding my kids and paying my mortgage, is sitting in this IKEA desk chair in this office that I built and decorated myself, and suddenly it looks, not to toot my own horn, it looks better than most people's, Zoom setup. And now I'm like, "Hey, who's the dummy now, kids? Me. Wait, you. I don't know. Somebody's the dummy. We're all dummies now."
I mean, I would never know that was a garage if you didn't tell me. So I would say, well done.
Thanks.
This is World Cafe. I'm Raina Douris. I'm speaking to Rhett Miller of the Old 97's today on World Cafe about their new album, 12th. So we're going to hear you perform for us. The song we're going to hear you perform for us next is a new one from that album called Belmont Hotel, and it is a real place. Could you tell us about the Belmont Hotel?
So the old Belmont Hotel was originally a motor court type hotel in the Oak Cliff neighborhood of Dallas, in South Dallas. My grandfather, whom I've written about extensively in Sports Illustrated, was a real character. In 1952, he bought an NFL franchise, and lost the family fortune that he'd been born into by trying to bring NFL football to Dallas, which you would never think that that would be a losing proposition. But he was 3 years before the TV contracts came. He was sort of cursed because he had assumed that we were to a point with the racial situation in Dallas where a team with black players would be accepted, but it wasn't. Like the city fathers put their foot down. They wouldn't let black fans buy tickets in the proper seats at the Cotton Bowl. They had to stand in these roped off sections at the end zone. And it was heartbreaking for my grandfather. I mean, I guess for me too, I could have been brought up as a rich kid instead of just like a regular middle class kid, but that's a different story. So my grandfather, though, would during those years, like I said, he was a character. He had girlfriends, and he would go. This is an old Texas money guy. I'm not defending this at all, but he would take girlfriends to this old motor court, the Belmont Hotel. And the Belmont Hotel then went into, I only provide that as a weird historical footnote. The Belmont Hotel fell into disrepair. Nobody owned it for a long time. It was just a place where vagrants and junkies and garbage collected there, and weeds grew up through all the asphalt, and the rooms, the ceilings fell in. And then a group of investors came along and decided that they were going to turn this back into a thing. And they were really cool, the folks that rebuilt it, and they decided they wanted it to have a rock and roll feeling. So they would invite folks like me to stay there for good rates. I know Alejandro Escobedo, who's appeared on World Cafe. He lived there. He may still live there now, but for years he's lived there. Raul Malo from the Mavericks, stays there sometimes for long stretches, kind of lives there. I stay there when I go through town. It's like this, and it's so beautiful now. So I was there one day, and I was in a room with a view of all of downtown Dallas skyline, and it was the Margaret Hunt Hill Bridge, which is really beautiful. And I felt kind of grateful for the weird perks that my job offers. And my job no longer offers the brass ring of, massive wealth. That's fine. Like, that's not why I got into it to begin with. But it does offer perks up and down the line. And staying at the Belmont Hotel for a super good rate is one of them. And I felt just kind of grateful. And I also started thinking about the metaphor that is the Belmont Hotel, something that was once beautiful, if tawdry, and went through like this fallow period and is now like once again even more beautiful than it ever was. And I thought about that as a metaphor for not just like a marriage or love relationship, but even, a rock and roll band. So that day I sat down in the Belmont Hotel and I wrote this song. It's like an old folk song. It's like a 3-4 time waltzy. I thought it was too sweet for my bandmates, but they heard it and they loved it. And what Vance did, Vance added strings to it. It's the only song on the record that has um, musicians other than us playing on it. It's this little string section playing, and it's so beautiful. As soon as I heard the mix of it, I cried. I won't lie to you. I
Really?
cried, Raina. It was
Oh,
very sweet.
well, I wonder if anyone's going to cry right now because we're going to hear you play it. This is Rhett Miller of the old 97's playing Belmont Hotel.
The old Belmont Hotel. Our love is like the old Belmont Hotel. It was in ruins, now it's doing quite well. The windows were busted, big holes in the walls. Madmen and wildlife was roaming the halls. Now there's a swimming pool with 2 waterfalls, and it's better than brand new now. Our love is like the old Belmont Hotel. It was condemned by the town for a spell. Vagrants moved in and set fires in the rooms. Ceilings were charred and the air thick with fumes. Now there's a garden where bluebonnets bloom, and it's better than brand new now. So many times good buildings get torn down, razed to the ground, because work is hard to do. Oh, but if you try, if you don't let a living thing die, it might wind up better than brand new. Our love is like the old Belmont Hotel, restored to the grace from which it fell. We almost gave up, but we both stayed right here. The hope we held on to was stronger than fear. Now all I can say is I love you, my dear, and we're better than brand new now. Yeah, we're better than brand new now.
Belmont Hotel performed for a live virtual World Cafe audience by Rhett Miller of the old 97's. That song is from the new old 97's album 12th. Got to talk about the album cover for a minute. Rhett, you do know we make World Cafe in Philadelphia, home of the
Ah.
2018 Super Bowl champions, the Philadelphia Eagles. So I just want to hold this up. I don't know if our audience will be able to see it on my phone, but would you mind explaining this album cover and what we're looking at with my dirty phone? Would
Yeah.
you mind explaining this album cover and what we're looking at here?
All right, it came to me in a dream. Roger Staubach was my childhood hero, the quarterback of the Dallas Cowboys. Now, if you just immediately paint all Dallas Cowboys with the brush of a Philadelphia Eagles fan, hating them from, start to finish for no reason whatsoever, remember that Roger Staubach is from the Midwest, Cincinnati, Ohio, the Rust Belt maybe. He grew up there. He then served in the Navy. After having won the Heisman Trophy and a great college career, he gave the best years of his athletic life to the U.S. Armed Forces, and he came back finally as a 27-year-old rookie to the Dallas Cowboys, and he led us to two Super Bowl titles. He was such an exciting player to watch. He invented the play that is known throughout American football as the Hail Mary play.
Right?
Um, and he invented that phrase, I think, because he's a devout Catholic, despite the fact that he's like a really funny, snarky guy. I mean, when you say devout Catholic, it might make you think, oh, he's really uptight. He's not. I've gotten to be friends with him now as an adult in the last decade or so. And
Wait, how did you get to be friends with him?
well, like I said, perks. These are the perks. He's got a bunch of kids, and his son Jeff and I are pretty good friends because Jeff was a big fan of the old 97's, and Michelle, his daughter. And I got to be friends with those guys, and they started inviting me and my family to come watch Cowboy games from the Staubach box. In fact, one of my favorite memories is looking over about 7 years ago, and Tony Romo was finally going to beat the New York Giants in the new Cowboy Stadium, and he'd never beaten the Giants at home. And I look over, and my son, who was 7 years old at the time, was standing next to Roger Staubach, who, when I was my son's age, was no, Max was 10 years old. 10 years old at the time. When I was 10 years old, nobody was above Roger Staubach. So I look over, and there's my 10-year-old standing next to Roger Staubach. They're both kind of standing there with their arms crossed, looking cool, just the two of them. And I see Roger turn to Max and say, I'm really glad Tony's finally beating the Giants. I was 11-1 against the Giants. And I'm like, oh my God, Roger Staubach's bragging to my son about his record versus the Giants. Anyway, okay, sorry. The photograph on the cover of this album is supposed to evoke a bygone time. It's a grainy, beautiful, iconic photo of Roger Staubach floating, seeming to float in midair as he passes the football. I really love how wistful the photograph is, or makes me feel. I think that even if Randall Cunningham perhaps is your favorite number 12 of all time, I think you can appreciate the memories that might be evoked by such a photograph.
Sure. So, 'cause I was gonna say, when I moved to Philly last fall, one of the first things I learned, I think it was before my first day of work, even, that an important part of being an Eagles fan is not being a Dallas Cowboys fan. So you weren't worried. You weren't worried about how any of your Philly fans or fans anywhere else who might know about sports rivalries were gonna respond to that.
You know, uh, Thanks to XPN and thanks to the incredibly fantastic taste of the Philadelphia uh, music fans, we have a fan base that I think would forgive us pretty much anything. Really, more than anything, I was worried that people would look at it, and this was just a minor concern, that people would look at it and think, oh, this is a record by jocks, or it's about sports, or something like that. But I do think that there's something so um, I don't know, like mysterious about that image that hopefully people will see it as something that's more general than something that's like by a bunch of, because we're not jocks. We're not, I mean, I remember the worst thing that people used to call us in the day was they'd say, oh, they're a bunch of frat boys. I'm like, bro, you do not know, we're like the farthest thing from frat boys that there are. I went to Sarah Lawrence, and which is the artsiest school in America, and even that was too much. I had to drop out after one semester. Come on. Sorry, do I sound offensive?
Not at all. Not at all. This is World Cafe. I'm Raina Douris talking to Rhett Miller of the Old 97's. They have a new album called 12th, appropriately named, as it is the band's 12th album. Old 97's have been together for almost 25 years. Do I have that right?
27 years.
27 years.
Yeah.
And you've been putting out music consistently since you started. No big long breaks, and most notably, no lineup changes. What do you attribute that stability to?
I think being in a band that lasts for decades, and it's a pretty rare thing, especially if you don't have big money making hits where you're not beholden to some, like company sized group of people whose job it is to milk the catalog. A band like ours that has done well enough to, raise multiple kids in all four of our families, and you know, we're like middle class musicians, and that's a pretty rare thing these days. But so to make that work and to keep it going for a long time is a pretty tricky thing. But it can really just be boiled down to like a marriage. You listen, you let the other person win sometimes, or just don't even let it become a battle to begin with. I mean, these are all things that took so long for me to figure out. It was probably 15 years into our band before I let go of some of my more controlling instincts, trying to, gosh, I remember I used to get mad at the guys when, there's two of you wearing plaid shirts. We can't walk out on stage with two different people wearing plaid shirts in one band. What are you doing? And I just let it go. You know what? They are human beings with their own agency, and they're going to do what they're going to do. And the more I try to control them, the more they're angrier they're going to get. So it's it's um it's a long learning experience, and I won't, I don't have it 100% down. I learn things all the time. We still encounter road bumps. The fact that they let me make solo records here and there between old 97's albums helps me to give up some of my, more controlling impulses, perhaps. But by the time I'm finished making and touring behind those solo records, I miss them because there's a thing about being, any long relationship where you have a shared history is going to be deeper than something that doesn't have that. So when I'm away from them for too long, which actually right now I'm really feeling it, I miss them. I miss making music with them. I miss performing with them. I miss playing them my newest songs. I miss hearing their dumb jokes and getting their unexpected feedback. I never know what they're going to say, and I love it because it's always something good. It's always something I don't always agree, but it's always something that helps me figure out what I think better.
Have you been able to keep in touch with them during all of this? Have you been talking and jamming online or anything like that?
It's funny, jamming online just isn't a thing.
It's hard.
The lag is so, I mean, even just like a Zoom conversation, you end up talking over each other. You end up having to, kind of, it's awkward. The awkwardness of the necessary technology is making everyone's life right now just weirder. But thank God we have this.
At least we've got this. It's not bad at all.
Yeah.
Um, you're playing a bunch of new songs for us today, but you're also treating us to one from way back at the beginning, from your 1996 major label debut, Too Far to Care. Out of your huge catalog, why did you want to play Barrier Reef for us today?
A common question when you run into, I don't know, a stranger or a fan, or like say some kind of like my wife's cousin or something. A common question from a non-musician is, what's the best song you've ever written? What's your favorite song you've ever written? And that's just an insane question for me to have to answer because I'm at like, I don't know, 1,200 recorded songs or something now. Not to brag, but it's a lot. um, it's usually like my favorite song is usually the most recent song that I just wrote. Or right now, Turn Off the TV is doing well at radio. So I love that song because what if something really happens and it breaks through and then my kids get to grow up, with some security? But those are all things I can't really explain to them. So I go back to what song, when I perform it in the before times, in front of a big group of people who aren't afraid to congregate in close proximity and sing at the top of their lungs, what song inspires the most singing along? And this is probably the one that does the most for fans of mine and fans of ours. Whenever I go, especially on a solo show, I put this song usually towards the end of the set, and I will start singing it, and then I'll kind of back away from the mic and sing it a little bit at a remove, and I'll let the audience be a part of it, and we sing it together usually, and it's incredibly moving to me. I mean, I'm not gonna again say about getting choked up, but I might get a little choked up here and there when the audience is all singing back these words that I remember distinctly writing in 1995, driving around in a van full of my bandmates. And here I am a man on the brink of turning 50 years old, and this song still lives on with a life of its own and connects with people in a way where it's become a part of their life too. It's really moving to me.
Well, we are in front of a virtual live audience, so if everyone sings along loud enough, maybe somehow we'll hear each other. We're going to hear Rhett Miller play Barrier Reef now on World Cafe.
The empty bottle was half empty, tide was low, and I was thirsty. I saw her sitting at the bar. Well, you know how some girls are always making eyes. Well, she wasn't making eyes. So I sidled up beside her, settled down and shouted, "Hi there, my name's Stuart Ransom Miller. I'm a serial lady killer." She said, "I'm already dead," and that's exactly what she said. So we tripped, the lights fantastic. We was both made of elastic. Midnight came and midnight went, and I thought I was the president. She said, "Do you have a car?" And I said, "Do I have a car?" What's so great about the Barrier Reef? What's so fine about art? What's so good about a good times band? When you're working on a broken, working on a broken, working on a broken man. When you're working on a broken, working on a broken, working on a broken man. Oh yeah. My heart wasn't in it, not for one single minute. But I went through the motions with her, her on top and me on liquor. Didn't do no good when I didn't think it would. What's so great about the Barrier Reef? What's so fine about art? Oh, and what's so good about a good times band? When you're working on a broken, working on a broken, working on a broken man. When you're working on a broken, working on a broken, working on a broken man. When you're working on a broken, working on a broken, working on a broken man. Oh yeah!
Rhett Miller of Old 97's performing that live in front of a virtual audience on World Cafe. The song is called Barrier Reef. That one is from the Old 97's 1996 album, Too Far to Care. Rhett Miller is my guest on the show today. It's been about 24 years since you put that song out. Things have changed a lot. And Rhett, I wanted to say congratulations. I know this summer marks your anniversary of being 5 years sober.
Oh yeah. Thanks.
Yeah, I read about 6 years ago, after your album Most Messed Up, you made that decision. But it sounds like you didn't hit this, terrifying rock bottom like a lot of people do before they decide to get sober. What was the turning point for you?
It's funny. My friend Kyle Kinane is a comedian from Chicago, and he just released a new album called "Trampoline in a Ditch," and it's so funny. And but he's not sober, but he has a big bit about the relativity of rock bottom, because some people will describe their rock bottom and it's just way beyond anything that you could imagine. Um, for me, I was watching my kids enter into pre-adolescence and adolescence, and I just knew that I wanted to be there for them, like present. And I knew that with the way I was kind of living my life, that wasn't going to work. And my everybody's story is different. Everybody that winds up wanting to get sober and eventually being successful at it comes from a different place. I feel lucky that I was able to get over the hump. And once, if it's something that is uh, that would work for you, would work better than that's something they say. I didn't do a ton of AA, but one thing they say in AA is it wasn't working for me. And so that stuck with me. Like it wasn't working for me. And now I really love it. I used to feel so sorry for anyone that had to stop drinking or didn't get to drink. I used to be like, oh my God, you must have had some really horrible things happen, and now your life is just so sad and boring. I feel so bad for you. But it's weird because once you get to the other side, you're like, oh my God, this is way better. It's like I get to be sober. This is actually great. So some people are able to do moderation. I wasn't as much. So I love it. It's taken a while to kind of figure out how to do what I do as a sober person because I'm in bars every night. And it took a while for people to stop just placing whiskeys at the base of my microphone. I would look down and it would be like this little tiny ocean of whiskey spreading out around me. But it's been really great, and I've never regretted it.
And you've had some friends to lean on too during all of this. You know, you turned to Jason Isbell for advice. What did he tell you?
He's such an inspiration in general. I really love the way he approaches life, music. He's a great dad now. It seems like he and Amanda have such a great marriage. I love the way he deals with social media. I just think he's so funny on there, but he doesn't take it too seriously. There's a lot to look up to with Jason, and I knew him from back when he was a freaking disaster, and I'm just so proud of him. But so yeah, I remember reaching out to him, just sort of asking, "What is the way forward? Is there a way forward?" And him telling me like, "Oh yes, you don't know it now, but there's a way forward." And then once I had finally gotten to the other side, oh my God, how am I supposed to talk about this? It just feels so like, ugh, it's not something I don't want this to be my narrative. Like, I don't want to have to every single time I talk in front of people talk about it. It's so depressing and embarrassing. There's a lot of shame, I guess, that goes into it to getting to this place. Um, and he made the point, and this is something that I've also come to believe about my own experience as someone who survived a suicide attempt when I was really young. He made the point, if you talk about something, you're going to help someone, even if it's just one person. And so, since in the last 10 years, I decided I would just be really open about my own experiences with, and struggles with mental health and with suicide. And it's something that should be destigmatized. The more you can talk about it, the easier it is to cope with. And so, same thing with sobriety. I'm not ashamed. I'm happy to be where I am. And if by talking about it I can help a person here or there, I would take that, even if it means making another person here or there feel uncomfortable. So, you know, I'll do it.
And you open up about it on this album. Uh, I'm thinking of the track Confessional Boxing, and you have lines in there like, I thought it was funny living life like a lush. Um, so after talking to Jason Isbell about being more open and feeling self-conscious, here we are a couple of years later. You've put that out in the world. How does it feel? Like, how does it feel to commit that to a record and be like, this is my story?
So much better than I was afraid. Like I said, I went into it just it's funny how sometimes people whose job is to be in the spotlight, if their personal life is put in the spotlight, it's almost as if they're the opposite when it comes to that. Like, I didn't want people to actually know me. It's way better if you know the me that's in Barrier Reef that's walking up to the girl at the bar saying, hey, whatever, like being cool. Like, I was not cool. For me, getting sober wasn't about being cool. And certainly the years that led up to it had a lot of times where I wasn't cool. But yeah, I feel really good about it. I especially feel good about it when friends of mine, musicians especially, will reach out to me and say, this is something I'm thinking about. And then I become, what Jason and a handful of other people were for me. I become someone who's been through it, is on the other side, and can tell you how great it is to make it to the other side, how hard it is, but also once you're there, it stops being hard and it really becomes beautiful and you'll never regret it. I think about Joey Santiago from the Pixies. I'm not taking any credit for where he's at now, but Joey is a great friend of mine and he's been sober now for 3.5 years. And to see him now, it's like he's a different person and he's so happy and he's so ripped and he's a sartorial god and he's out on his bike riding 100 miles and the Pixies are killing it. Their last two records are as good as anything they've ever done. So that's when it makes me feel really good, where I feel like, okay, now I can mentor people. Not that I'm mentoring Joey Santiago, please don't get me wrong. But like I can help people now, and that's a good feeling.
It's interesting because I think the topic of sobriety has come up with many people I've talked to on this show. And one common thread that seems to run through a lot of it is this fear that getting sober might affect your creativity. Was that something that was on your mind?
Oh my God, my whole creative persona has been a drunk. Whenever any kids, eventually my kids, but even before that, other people's kids would be at the shows or wind up somewhere where I had to sing songs, I have to tell them, these songs are about people who make poor decisions. These songs are also about me. So I'm a person who's making poor decisions. Um, so yeah, it's a weird thing. Like on any given night, I'll look down at my set list and the names of the songs, because you just put one word on a set list. You don't write out the whole name of the song. Although in the case of the songs I'm going to mention, their names were one word. I'll look down and the song will be wasted, stoned. It's like just one
Right.
after the other. It's these, like it's a chronicle of a life led to the darkest corners of debauchery. And I have lived to tell the tale, and I've lived to sing those songs. And now when I sing them, it's funny because it's like a time machine. I get to go back to those times where it was just so wheels off in my life. It was like just spinning out of control. And there was something fun about it. Like if you survive it and you get to the other side, you can look back and say, "Oh man, I had a great time," but it wasn't gonna last. So it's nice to revisit those days, like a day on a day pass, as it were.
I mean, and you've written lots of songs since getting sober, so obviously you found your muse and you were able to still be creative. Were there any strategies that you found you had to be like, oh, I need to think of something to write about? Usually right now I might have a drink and
Yeah.
loosen up. Did you ever face any moments like that where you were like, okay, how do I get through writing an actual song now?
Well, I did. I faced about 2 years worth of moments like that. And what I did was, and I would recommend this to anyone, even if it's not specifically about songwriting, go to your friends. There's a reason they're your friends. Maybe not the friends who want to take you by the hand and lead you down the darker alleys, but the friends who really love you and see the light in you. So during those times when I was trying to find my voice again, and trying to stop lying to myself that the only value I had as a songwriter was someone whose job it was to chronicle, spiraling into despair or drunkenness. I went and I wrote a song with Ben Queller. I wrote a song with Nicole Atkins and Butch Walker and these people that they're not necessarily sober people, even just people that I knew, that I cared about, that cared about me. And that way I was able to write a song where it wasn't all on me. I was able to, maybe if there was something weird in there, I could blame it on them. Like, that was all Nicole Atkins. Sorry, that wasn't me. I would never do that or say that. But it took some of the pressure off me, and I felt like I was in a safe place. But eventually, I knew that I would have to write songs all by myself, that I had to answer for and stand behind and sing on stage without being able to point the finger at anyone else. And this record is 100% those songs.
We're going to hear one more of those songs in just a second. I'm talking to Rhett Miller of the Old 97's on World Cafe. We have one more song you're going to perform for us today. It's the opening track of your new album. It's such a fun one. What can you tell us about the Dropouts before we hear it?
Well, you won't hear this when I play it for you right now. You'll hear what it sounded like when I wrote it. But when the Old 97s recorded it, it was a dream coming true, because when I wrote it, I had this vision of Adam and the Ants had this record, Kings of the Wild Frontier. And Adam Ant did a lot of stuff, but this record was really a distillation of what he was good at, and his guitar player, Marco Perroni, who produced it. These guys, there was this one moment in the late 70s where they were combining tribal drums with this kind of chanting, big fat Telecaster or hollow body guitar sounding riffs. So I texted the guys when I wrote the song, because of course we have a band text chain, and I said, I just wrote an Adam and the Ants song. And they were like, okay, whatever, Rhett. But man, they made it come to life. And Philip, our drummer, when he recorded this overdub track of him playing these giant floor toms, and it's just, oh, I knew it as soon as I heard those floor toms. This is the first song on the record. I want this to be the first thing anybody hears on our new record, and it's so good. The song itself is again, it's like a time machine. It's going back to the earliest days of the old 97's, where Ken was playing a Harmony Rocket guitar, this really cheap guitar, and it's got one of the many mentions on the album of hardwood floors. Everybody's sleeping on a hardwood floor. It was just all about, being young and living in absolute just poverty, but feeling like we could fly, like we were invincible. It was such a great feeling. And so, in so many ways, unwarranted, because we had not accomplished anything. We had, we didn't have food in the fridge. To drink beer, I had to sneak a six-pack out of the bar that I'd clean bar, finish at 5 in the morning. I'd put a six-pack under my sweatshirt and sneak out to my car. I'm not saying I stole. I think the statute of limitations is passed on that. But it was such a rough time in so many ways, but it was also the best, like the most fun I've ever had.
It's interesting that you just said hardwood floors appear a lot, and how sleeping on a hardwood floor means that you're kind of scraping by, but then like getting hardwood floors as an adult is like you really made it. Hardwood floors factor in a big way in many developmental stages of your life. And now we're going to hear Rhett Miller play the version that I guess sounds like how it all started, this song, The Dropouts.
Yeah,
oh, go ahead.
Sorry, but I know that you just set it up so professionally. You're such
That's okay.
Which, by the way, I don't want this interview to end without me telling you congratulations on the great job you're doing as the host of World Cafe. This is great.
Thank you. Thank you so much. That
mean,
means
it's
a lot.
such a storied post. David Dye is one of my heroes. I thought Thalia did a great job, but I've been so gratified seeing the way that you are carrying on the tradition and killing it.
Oh, that means so much to me, Rhett. Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you. Big shoes to fill.
Yeah. Oh, but when I wrote these songs, they just sound like folk songs. It's so funny. They just sound like these little folk songs. And in fact, this one, I finished it. The actor Rainn Wilson, who played Dwight on The Office.
I noticed he had a thank you in the album credits, and I was like,
Yeah.
what? Where did that come from?
I could have made a whole separate list of thank yous just for Rainn, because he and his wife Holiday Reinhorn own a cabin in Central Oregon, and I had a few days off in a West Coast tour, and I'd spoken to Rainn, and he said, you've got to go to my cabin and write songs there. It's magical. And I thought, well, that seems like a pretty far way out of the way for me to go. But he talked me into it, and damn if he wasn't right, because I went there and I finished, I don't know, 9 of the 12 songs on this album were finished in Rainn and Holiday's cabin, including, I remember specifically, this one. I was so inspired writing this song in Rainn's cabin. So it sounded like a folk song when I wrote it, but my band turned it into that rock song you just heard.
Well, we're going to hear it kind of how you would have heard it in Rainn Wilson's cabin then, I guess, right now. This is Rhett Miller with The Dropouts on World Cafe.
All right. Finally, this song is called The Dropouts. Dropouts paid in alcohol, late night long shots at the bar, waiting and waiting and waiting on a phone call. My one true love is this cheap guitar. Hey, everybody flying in a Harmony rocket, everybody sleeping on a hardwood floor. You got two $2 bills in your pocket. You got no idea when you'll get more. But that's alright. It's going down downtown. We got nothing, but nothing's good enough for the dropouts. Oh yeah. Buildings made of bricks and mortar. Mockingbirds up in the sky. Man, I hated going to high school. All I wanted was to learn how to fly. But that's alright. Turns out you don't need wings when you've got whiskey and guitar strings. About midnight, oh, we gon' get real loud. We got nothing, but nothing's good enough for the dropouts. In a parallel universe, everybody's wasted. In another life where we all live. In the straight world, everybody thinks we've lost it. Oh, but we all see what a joke it is. I know you, even if I don't know your name. The real world can be really lame. You gotta make your own sunshine when you're underground. We got nothing, but nothing, 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 nothing's good enough for the dropouts. Oh yeah, we're the dropouts. We're the dropouts.
That was the Dropouts song from the old 97's new album 12th. You just heard it performed live in front of a virtual audience by the old 97's Rhett Miller for World Cafe. Rhett Miller has been my guest today. Thank you so much. This has been so much fun.
This is great, Raina. Thank you so much.
I really loved it. I'm Raina Douris, back in a moment with more World Cafe.